Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Today's guest is Ethan Bolt, the co-founder and CEO of ProAssisting, an organization that provides fractional remote executive assistant support to companies at a fraction of the price of hiring a full-time EA. Ethan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sanjay.
So I'm excited to have you on. I think you might be one of the only, maybe one of a handful of executive assistance companies that we've ever had on the show. So it'll be interesting to kind of dig in. But before we get to that, give us a little bit about your background and what got you to where you are today.
Well, I actually grew up in upstate New York in a really small town. I wanted to run away as quickly as possible. Ended up going to Bentley University, which is a specialty business school outside of Boston. I also was playing in a band, and I ended up leveraging my business education into an internship for Warner Brother Records. And that actually led me to taking a job with Warner Brothers as a production assistant on a movie shooting in New York City right after graduation. And through that role, I was a production assistant. I was a production coordinator, a production secretary, an office assistant. Basically, all those roles are an executive assistant role on steroids. I realized that I wanted to write and direct, and I leveraged my assistant capabilities into a role working at Deutsch, which is a billion-dollar ad agency, and I supported the chief operating officer there for 13 years. You move up the ranks, you roll over one day, and poof, you have a career. And so I ended up leading a team of assistants, and at the end of that part of our career, and then our son Henry came along, and we decided to leave New York City. And now I'm back in Canandaigua, but now I love it.
Yeah. Okay. You glossed over the movie. Can you share which movie it was that you worked on?
Yeah, it was Addicted to Love. It was shooting in 1996. My first morning going to the production office, I stand in the lobby and Meg Ryan steps up next to me. And we get on the elevator, just the two of us. I'm completely starstruck. I tell her, and she just brings me right down and said, "Oh, how long have you been in New York?" I said, "1 day." And she was like, "1 day?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Where'd you come from?" I'm like, "I graduated from Bentley." And she really just made it really, really relaxed. And the thing is that was really pre-internet. So none of the information about what movies were shooting, where, who was in it, I had no idea. So, I spent the next 4 months getting her steamed broccoli for lunch, and she couldn't have been more gracious throughout that whole period.
Yeah. It's really nice to hear about folks like that are just genuinely nice people, right? That are celebrities and people that you've seen from afar, because then it's like, okay, all is right in the world. Like, these are nice people, and you're very happy for them for the success that they've had. So great.
I have stories on the other side of that equation, which I won't go into.
I had a bad feeling you did, and I didn't want to ask.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, so is this the first time that you've done anything entrepreneurial, or have there been entrepreneurs in the family, or is this the first time for you?
My dad is an entrepreneur through and through. He graduated college and worked 3 years as a 6th grade teacher, and then said, "I'm never doing that again." He got into real estate. He opened a bar. He opened a construction company. he sold the bar, bought a bowling alley, sold the bowling alley, bought a restaurant, was in the restaurant about 23 years, owned trailer parks throughout, still has a couple trailer parks, but is mostly retired. For myself, I actually had a business when I was a junior in high school. I bought a 900 number where these are these numbers where you would call and be charged an amount. I found a company in Woburn, Massachusetts that had glow-in-the-dark condoms and novelty condoms, and I wanted to promote safe sex because that was kind of the height of the AIDS epidemic. So I took an ad out in Rolling Stone magazine for quite a bit of money at that time, set up the 800 number, went and recorded the ad, and with a professional voiceover artist. And that was my first experience in terms of, return on ad spend and customer acquisition cost and all of that. And all those numbers were negative. So it was a very short-lived experience. I tell you that to say, yes, I've always been entrepreneurial at heart.
Yeah. So this was in the late 80s, I take it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, you can only throw money at things for so long until you realize like this is just not working. So good that you figured that out sooner rather than later.
Exactly.
In terms of that.
Exactly.
Okay. So always been entrepreneurial. How did you start this business? How did this come about? What was the point in time where you decided to take the leap and go all in?
Well, what's interesting is that I was a career executive assistant in New York City, as well as my wife. So she supported two different hedge fund CEOs, as well as the CEO of J. Crew, Mickey Drexler, for a stint. And in those roles, I mean, we're making well into the six figures, working a 24/7 mentality, really providing high-level support that covers both business and personal worlds. And when our second son came along, we had to question, do we want to jump into the nanny game again? And in New York City, it really is a game and a very expensive one, to pay the mortgage on our condo just so we could go work these two jobs. Or did we want to completely change our life? And we decided on the latter, and we moved back to Canandaigua, New York. What's interesting is that we're about 25 minutes from Rochester, New York, which is a town of less than 1 million people in the city proper. And so finding a role that was commensurate with our experience was unlikely. But fortunately, I was recruited to support the CEO of a $16 billion healthcare or $2 billion healthcare network with 16,000 employees. And my wife was at home, and she got a call from a friend of ours who said, I know you're not working. I know a Fortune 100 consultant. She travels the world. She needs great support. She doesn't need full time. She doesn't care where you are. Are you interested? My wife was pulling her hair out with two young boys at home and said, absolutely, I'm interested. And that was in 2017, kind of sent us on this market research role on what the remote or virtual assistant support space looked like. And we saw a gap, and we decided to fill that with ProAssisting.
Yeah. Interesting. So when you were working during that time, were you also in person, or were you remote, or how was it for you at that point?
Oh, I was full-time in person. So I had a 45-minute commute both ways. Okay. And I was also director of admin services. So I oversaw a team of about 80 assistants supporting 250 executives throughout the network.
Okay. So, so your wife starts working kind of remotely part-time. When does the idea kind of come of being like, hey, let's do this as a business and us get out of the game of providing support and finding other people to do it?
Yeah. Well, after 2 years of supporting the CEO, he decided he wanted to go a different direction. I had basically reorged the support staff, and I may have been, in his mind, comped at a spot where he wanted to readjust and use a different assistant. So I got let go. And, and what we did is right out of the gate, took my severance package and put it into, launching ProAssisting. We had seen that gap and Stephanie was filling it with one client, and we said, there's got to be more people out there like this. And so um, it it was a natural progression, and a risk, but yet I think the easiest and best types of businesses to start initially are service-based businesses, leveraging your expertise, and that's what we did.
Yeah. It's interesting though that, and I think this is a very common story, is that the forcing function for you was really getting fired because this wasn't necessarily in your mind to do this before you got fired.
No, it was in my mind, but there was also I was already 2 years into a
Right.
5-year vesting of retirement,
Oh,
and figured, we can wait and get through it that way, and but it obviously, my boss always told me I would go on to do bigger and better things. I just didn't know it was going to be at his choosing rather than mine. So no, it all worked out, and it was the best thing to ever happen to me. And I have to
right.
give him a lot of credit because he was very generous in the severance package, and
Yeah.
and that really was able to give us that runway,
Yeah.
that we needed.
Yeah. So in starting this, was there anything that made you nervous? I mean, I imagine there had to have been because you're like going from, full-time job. You thought you were going to be there for at least 3 more years. And that's how they get you, by the way, with that vesting of stuff, to like, hey, I'm going to be a founder and an entrepreneur and start my own thing.
Yeah, it wasn't helpful when every time I saw my dad, he would say, "So, are you looking for a job?"
Oh,
And
parents are always like
I
that.
would say, "No, not at the moment." But really, honestly, Sanjay, the best thing about being an executive assistant is it is a trade. It's a very valuable trade that you can take anywhere. It's industry agnostic, it's principal agnostic. So we always knew, Stephanie and I were always like, well, we can go get jobs, but can we fill ourselves up with clients? And 6 months later, we had.
Yeah. That line right there, I think is very common. And you being a parent, me being a parent, I think we recognize it too, right? Like you always are worried about your children, regardless of how old they are. And want to make sure that you're being taken care of, like they're doing the right things for themselves.
Well, or be caught holding the bag and having to write checks for your kids to keep them rolling. But no, listen. I get the conservative nature and all of that, and um, we're just grateful that there was a lot of timing that had to happen on the
Right.
technology side of things for us to do what we do, and there was just that serendipitousness of talking to the right people at the right time.
Yeah. So when you started this, it was pre-COVID, pre-pandemic.
Mhm.
And so, some of the tools were probably there, but those have obviously all of us have experienced a wide acceleration that's happened afterwards. How do you think that helped you shape the business by doing this kind of before everybody else realized that remote was a thing?
Well, I would say that the convergence of technology in the browser separated and the need to have whether you needed a PC or a Mac. And the iPhone also brought along an app economy that allowed ubiquitous between Android and Apple. And so it really, at that point in 2017, 2018, we were saying to ourselves, it really doesn't matter what platform you're on. So that was awesome. And that really reinforced the idea that we can do this for different kinds of clients and different kinds of people on different technological platforms. But also the the pandemic opened people's eyes to the ability that it can work. And that we didn't have a huge influx of business, but it just meant I didn't have to explain remote work anymore. And that, in terms of the sales process, was really kind of encouraging.
Yeah. Has the embracing of technology changed for you from kind of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic? Like, how has that shifted, and how has that helped in terms of effectiveness, productivity, all of those things for your team?
Well, I mean, everyone on our team is constantly trying to keep up with AI. I mean, that is always, I think we're always on that. We're going to be on that train for a while now, which is a good thing. At first, I was really scared. I kind of was that ostrich with his head stuck in the sand after November of 2022 when ChatGPT was announced. But I also I follow technology religiously, and I think that we're getting to a point where you're even seeing Apple come onto some headwinds around what's going to really be possible. And what we found is that our clients want us to be steeped in AI so they get the benefit of that leverage without having to keep up with all the headlines and understanding what to put in a prompt and realizing what the technology can do for them and their business and their office. So they're leaning in to us in that way rather than pulling back.
Yeah. So you think AI is really going to help you kind of sell your services? So, I mean, how does that then change for you in terms of the people that you find?
I don't know if I completely agree with that it's going to help us sell our services. The thing with us
Okay.
is that we're providing a higher level service than a virtual assistant.
Okay.
And we are really leaning into fractional, and where fractional, like remote is kind of included in fractional. And so when
Right.
you say fractional executive assistant, we partner with assistants who would command $120,000 in New York City or Atlanta, salary wise. And you don't get that level of talent in the virtual assistant space. And we limit the number of clients that our assistants has so that they can really provide that feeling of full service support for a fraction of what it would cost
Yeah.
hiring an employee.
Yeah. So just kind of diving a little bit deeper into AI, I'm kind of thinking about what you're saying here. It's almost like you're saying the people that are leveraging the people that you've got are kind of looking at for AI assistants, right? So people that are really smart about using AI or using different tools like this to be more productive and effective. Um, how are you thinking about that in terms of finding the right people to bring onto your team? Because, before AI, there was probably a skill set that you were looking for. Now it's that skill set plus this. And then, 5 years from now, it's going to be that plus AI plus something else that we maybe don't know yet. So how do you think about that in terms of finding the right people for your team?
Well, we're in a unique time right now where, frankly, the market is flooded with very high level executive assistants looking for roles.
Hmm.
And a lot of them came from big name tech companies that were providing that training and providing that guidance. So some of our assistants can run circles around me with artificial intelligence. Um, so I don't. I would also say that a great executive assistant is going to meet their client or their principal where they are, and they're going to learn the technology that the client or principal leverages. They're going to become an expert at that, and then they're going to start to run ahead and see where can they look around the corner? Where can they see 5 steps ahead? Where can they see, oh, I can take artificial intelligence, put it with Notion, and figure out the best invite to send for this event that's coming up. That's just something I pulled off the top of my head, but asking the question is key, and leaning into our assistants. They know they have to get smart on something if they're unfamiliar. But what we train to is understanding the technology landscape as a whole, understanding the terminology and how the pieces fit together, and then allowing them to get smart on what they need to when they need to.
Yeah. One thing that I think comes up often, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and founders, obviously, is that sense of control, right? Like that's probably one of the biggest things that people struggle with before they hire a virtual assistant or an executive assistant, or somebody to help them become more productive. And really and the other part of this is that initial, like, well, it's going to just take me so much time to get them up to speed. It'd just be faster if I did it myself. It's true in the short term, maybe not true in the long term. So in terms of a business, like, how do you think about these things and messaging these things in terms of marketing, to get people to understand that this is really something that will help them in the long run?
Yeah, the quote unquote, I can do it faster myself mentality.
Which, when you're dealing with entrepreneurs, is a very common thing.
Yeah, no, of course. One thing is that we explain to them that, yes, you may have to slow down to impart this knowledge onto your assistant, but imagine never having to do it again. And what we tackle are those things on the to-do list that continually get pushed down the list, that happen repeatedly, and where the assistant could actually do it. The other thing we leverage is our book. We wrote a book, The 29-Hour Workday, and that's how we kind of provide an instruction manual to our prospects, even if they don't choose to partner with us, and our clients, to give them a framework to start thinking about the things that they can hand off to their assistant. And the other thing I'll leave you with is that, given we partner with such high-level EAs who've done this for a long time, they're really good at managing up and getting those things out of the hands of the principal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about like the future and what you see for you in this business, and just fractional services like this. Like, where do you see it heading? Where do you see the challenges coming from?
For us, the challenge is education, in terms of educating the market that we actually exist, because everybody compares us to virtual assistants, and we sit between where those companies are, whether it's overseas or onshore, and where a full-time assistant would be. And so with us, you get the experience of that high-level EA, but and the cost savings, but it is more expensive than a straight virtual assistant. So there's that. But I think it is the best time to start a business from a fractional perspective, because small and medium-sized businesses have the ability to get expertise from a CMO, CFO, COO fractionally, versus making one bet that on one person hire to move their business forward. It's allowing small and medium-sized businesses to bridge that space that they need to get over to then start hiring C-suite full-time. And so I'm really excited. I as I said, I was, an ostrich with my head in the sand for the first 6 months after AI. Now I'm complete 180 on it. And and we've kind of proven it. We have clients who've been with us since 2018, 2019. And so we're a sticky service, but I also consider it a win when a client says, all right, Ethan, it's been a great 18 months, but we're going to go hire a full-time assistant. And I say, that's fantastic. And then we help in the hiring, the interviewing, the training, and then we part the relationship. And so there are a lot of 50-year-old plus executives out there who may not be aware of the fractional world and the role that they could play. And I just think the future is really bright there.
Yeah. How do you kind of think about then attacking that segment, and how do you access it really, right? Like, you're talking about a group of people that don't know you exist. And I think this is a question that applies to so many businesses, right? Like, there's a group that you can help, but they don't know you exist. How do you get them to know about you and be interested in buying?
Oh, we've done it all. We've done just to get our initial clients back in 2018, we paid $2,000 a month for 3 months for 15 phone calls, 5 a month. And we landed 2 clients there. One of them, Karen Feinerman on the CNBC show Fast Money. She's been a client of ours since 2018.
Yeah.
So that was amazing, but we also got amazing clients through LinkedIn outreach. Frankly, we tried pay-per-click last year very aggressively, and it didn't work. And what we're relying on now is we're really leaning into search engine optimization still, even though artificial intelligence is playing a role there. And we're very optimistic there in the next 12 to 18 months. And frankly, referrals just are the lifeblood of our business. But it goes back to the idea of what's a great business to start. And a service business, if you do it right, you can be in the black from day one.
Yeah.
And you can, if you play the long game, which we are, it's really hard to beat you.
Yeah. I got to ask this question because you kind of mentioned it, and I want to understand this exactly. So you said in those early days, you paid $2,000 a month for 3 months to get 15 calls. So 5 calls, so $400 a call. Who were you paying to get those calls?
It was a company called Sapper Consulting. I think they're still around, and they just emailed and bombarded email people consistently until they wrote back and said no thanks or schedule a call. Some of those calls were really gruff. People were not happy to speak with me. And frankly, the one that we landed to get Karen, it was her husband, who is Lawrence Golub of Golub Capital, CEO of Golub Capital, a $70 billion private equity firm. And he kept replying to the emails, not yet, not yet, not yet. It went on for 2 months. And then he finally said, call now. And that was it. I called him. He told me what the deal was. And ironically, my wife interviewed to be his assistant when we were living in New York.
Oh, that's so
and
funny.
got very far along in the process. So you take it's serendipitous, when you land a client like that. And that's the thing, you got to put yourself in those positions and open yourself. And then when the opportunity comes along, you need to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's change gears here a little bit. Let's talk about just work-life balance and managing the stress of running a business like this. When you started, you had younger kids, a little bit older now. So talk about that. Like, how do you think about that for yourself and for your wife in terms of balance and managing stress?
Well, I was not aware. The grass is always greener. Being a full-time employee for so long, I wasn't aware of just the inherent level of stress of running your own show, being your own business, not having that safety net of a large company behind you, even when things are going well, even when everything's perfect, and yet you can't sleep at night. And that was really surprising to me. And fortunately, we have, as I said, a very sticky service, and that creates recurring revenue. And we're finally to a point where it's like, okay, this is, after 4 or 5 years, you finally get comfortable in it and used to it. At least that's how long it took us. But I have to also give a ton of credit to Stephanie in terms of the relationship that we have, the communication, and that goes all the way back to being 2 executive assistants in New York City. And frankly, she was making 3 times the amount of money I was making, given the industry difference, me being in advertising, her being in finance. And those conversations mattered. And then in terms of running our own business, it's great because we're kind of siloed. She has her side, I've got my side. But again, it's a constant communication to talk through the stress. And I'm just grateful I have someone to do that with.
Yeah. You talked about a minute ago, like, staying up at night, sleepless nights because of the business and whatnot. What's the last time that happened? What do you remember the issue being that kept you up and kept you worried?
Well, I don't know if I'm a full-on empath, but I'm very, very empathetic. And it that can still happen with me with an individual client that really doesn't affect our balance sheet. So, but I still care. And I
Right.
still want to make it right. And I still know that I've got two sides of the equation. I've got an assistant that I want to make sure I'm coaching properly and that I'm standing by and that they're able to put food on the table. And I have a client who came to us for a certain reason, and I need to make sure we're meeting that expectation. And if we're not, I need to find out where we're not aligned. So I'm kind of a hard person to ask that question. I can be very optimistic and happy, but underneath I'm always thinking like about, client A is not doing very well right now, and or assistant C is not, aligned with this client and they're concerned. And so that I take that to heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good mark for a founder as well, right? Because you care about the business. It's not just you're doing
Absolutely.
transactions, you actually care about what's happening in the business. I think that's a lot of times the difference between the successful startups and businesses and the ones that are maybe lesser so.
Yeah, absolutely. 1000%.
Yeah. So thinking back, it's been a few years of this. Is there anything that stands out to you like, man, if I could go back in time and do that differently, oh, I would, and this is how I would do it.
You know, I guess in my career, when I was working for the chairman of a studio when we made Traffic,
Uh-huh.
a movie that won the Academy Award that
Yeah.
year.
Great movie. I know that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Steven Soderbergh, Michael
Yeah.
Douglas, and I had a window to move to Los Angeles and really go after the entertainment industry full bore, and I didn't want to leave New York.
Mm.
So I guess that may be a regret, but frankly, how things have turned out, I have absolutely no regrets right now.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think if you'd done that, what would be different with life now? Like, would you have gone just all into movies and stayed there and progressed that way and not done the executive assistant thing?
Well, I mean, the reason that I after that role, moved into working in advertising was because I wanted to be a writer director. I mean, I've written 12 screenplays. I'm a published graphic novelist. I got really far along with that graphic novel and screenplay in terms of working with a known name producer. We couldn't get across the finish line. The film business is probably the most entrepreneurial world that there is because everyone is working as an independent contractor. You're dealing in something that you can't put your finger on what's good and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And taste plays a huge role. So you have just a ton of ambiguity. So, I leveraged the assistant career to allow myself to work nights and weekends typing away, writing stories
Yeah.
to one day write and direct. So, yeah.
Yeah. So now you're doing a side hustle thing with your own business too on top of it. So
It's not
that's
a side
fantastic.
hustle. It is a full business.
The EA thing is the full business. The directing or like writing
Correct.
screenplays is the side
I
business.
have
Side
that one
hustle.
idea that I'm still noodling with, but yeah, that and playing music are definitely hobbies now.
Side hustles
Or
until
side,
they become big. Until they become big. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Last question for you. If you're talking to somebody who's thinking about taking the leap like you did and doing a full-time business, or already has a full-time business and thinking about a side hustle like you're doing, what advice would you have for them?
If you have a partner, I would say have a really open and honest discussion around your relationship, but more importantly, your finances, to make sure that you are situated properly to take a risk. And if you don't have a partner, I would have an open and honest discussion with yourself about where your finances are, about knowing what your run rate is, what your burn rate is as a human being, and where that line is. You know, coming up this way as bootstrapped, it's really hard for me to wrap my brain around, you know, landing seed or Series A funding to start a business. And that's a totally different ballgame. So take my advice with a grain of salt and that in mind. But I would say you know, Sanjay, I'll say this as well, and then I'll leave it at that. Whenever my wife and I are out on a date and we're sitting at the bar and this young couple sidles up next to us and they're all giddy and happy and they show us the ring. See, we just got engaged last week. And it's like, oh my God. And then they say, well, how long have you been married? And we're like, almost 20 years. And they're like, what's your advice? And Stephanie and I say the same thing every time. Be on the same page about your finances. It's not sexy, but it's really kind of a strong foundation, whether you're going to get married or start a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Ethan, this has been fantastic. Where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Ethan Bull, or check out ProAssisting. It's proassisting.com, ProAssisting.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on today.
Sanjay, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. And to hear more Side Hustle to Small Business stories or share your own story, visit hiscox.com/side hustle to small business. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. You can find more about me at my website, sanjayparekh.com.